Welcome to the Boston Art Podcast,
Boston's premier art podcast,
where we talk art, culture, and philosophy.
My name is Theodore Earthworms.
And I am Brian Huntress.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, unless you have any questions for us before we start, we're good to go whenever.
Yeah, that's great. And thank you for keeping this time. I'm sorry it's Friday with family, and I have a date to be out of town and be on the road by 5 o'clock. So.
No problem. That's fine.
Thank you.
Do you travel a lot with the work with the Triennial, or?
No, actually I don't. Our curators get to, but I don't. I'm just going to the North Shore. I'm going to go visit the curator of the Peabody Essex Museum.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were talking earlier, and I guess I was kind of curious about the genesis of the Triennial, because as I understood, it was previously named, it was previously listed under a different name, correct?
Yeah. So you want to start there?
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. We'd love to hear all about it.
Yeah. So the organization that I founded was called Now and There. Mm-hmm. Now temporary, there site-specific. And so the genesis of it was to just simply put more contemporary works in the public realm in the city of Boston. And that came out of my frustration with not really seeing much contemporary art in our public spaces, while knowing that there's really great, interesting work that's happening both here and, across the world. And when I say that, I mean, there's not only like great contemporary art that's happening, but also really, I sometimes don't like to use this word. I'm going to use it. Innovative things that are happening in the greater Boston area. And, right now we have the first female governor and the first female mayor of color. And, so many great ideas are coming out of here. But that same sort of vibrancy and spirit of, can do is just not seen yet in our public spaces.
Right.
So yes, this idea of how do we create more vibrancy and joy and discussion and dialogue in our public space came about under this organization called Now and There.
Wonderful. And that began in, I think I read 2014.
Yeah.
That's exciting. So 10 years.
Yes, it will be 10 years. It started in 2014. Our first project was 2015. So the Triennial opening May of 2015 will be our 10-year anniversary. What
a great way to celebrate.
And
sure. Why not? Go big.
Yeah. And I'm curious as to what, I guess I'm not familiar with the verbiage, but so does Triennial mean that this is something that would be happening every 3 years?
Yeah. Great question. So yes, the Triennial, these are happening nationally and globally, are free events that happen on a regular schedule. This one we're doing triennially every 3 years. Mm-hmm. So that means every 3 years, both, artists, public, institutional partners, city, hopefully visitors that come from even beyond the city can expect this every 3 years. So first one's in 2028. Sorry, wow. 2025, right. 2028, 2031.
Oh, that's cool.
And we will continue to do some of our core annual programs on the years when we're not having this citywide festival. So you might know we run a public art accelerator for local artists that's helping local artists understand how to, navigate permitting around public art, how to budget for public art, how to consider creating their own definitions of what is engagement and what does collaboration look like. And then we give them grant funds to go make a project happen. So we're now giving $26,000 to each artist that participates in the accelerator to make a project.
Oh, wow. That's exciting.
Yeah. So that'll continue on the years when we're not having a triennial. I don't like to call them off years because there's nothing off about it, But yeah.
So did you get involved in this, I guess, angle because are you a public artist yourself, or did you have
No, I'm not a public artist, but I am an artist.
Right.
And I I came to Boston because I was a painter and I got out of school and my parents had moved up here, and I was like, well, I'll just, live in my parents', whatever it was, basement or,
Right.
and figure out what painting, how to really be a painter, and then I'll move to New York. It was always like, I'm just going to be here for 2 years. That was 25 years ago.
That's awesome.
And, I believe that artists have, just a different way of looking at the world. And sometimes that can be to our detriment. And other times that can be a really powerful tool to help non-artists see the world differently and imagine other ways of being in the world.
Right.
So yes, it was a good question that you asked, because I did try public art myself. I did 2 projects before I started Now and There, just to make sure that this wasn't coming from a place of, I really want to secretly be a public artist. And I don't. I did a mural once, and it was so physically taxing, and there were like people heckling me, these guys who's in Downtown Crossing, and they were like, yo, I can do better. I'm like, get up here and help me.
Do it then.
Yeah, please. And then I did another project with Elisa Hamilton, who's gone on to become a public artist and socially engaged practice artist. And it was a fun project, but it was a little too conceptual, I think, for people who participated.
Gotcha.
So I learned how hard it is, how, physically hard it is, how you simply cannot make a living on public art. It's not sellable, and that's part of its appeal. And I think in those processes I also understood how the general public comes at contemporary art from a place of probably less experience than an artist, and how we need to make sure that the pieces that we put in the public realm have are generous in explaining why they're there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like the phrase you use. I'm forgetting it now. It was like, did you say socially engaged artist or socially based artist?
Yeah, socially engaged artist. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like that's kind of really in the air with Boston right now, where there really seems to be a hunger for more public art and more things happening that are engaging the community. Do you think that's born out of I don't know. Like, do you think that Boston has a history of not welcoming art like that? Like, I wonder why it's having such a big moment right now.
Another good question. I think Bostonians and greater Bostonians are naturally wired to be engaged. I find this to be a very, it's an intellectual city. People ask questions. They say, why can't this be better? How can this be different? But as you're saying, we haven't had that in our art and in our sort of visual and sort of festival culture. We're just behind.
Yeah.
When you go to another city in the U.S. or not internationally, you see more when it comes to murals and festivals. And, we can debate why that's happened. And I think a lot of people will say just the founding of this whole area and then the Puritans. But, regardless of that, we're in a moment right now where there's a new administration. There are different new organizations that are being run by younger people of color, people that are just saying, let's take all of that socially engaged work that we do in healthcare, in community care, and bring it into visual arts and other cultural forms. There's a hunger, and there's a lot of people that are willing to try this work too.
And I wonder too, how do you as a group kind of define that idea of being socially conscious in the art sector? Like, what does that look like in terms of your nonprofit?
It's still evolving, but we have put some parameters or goals around our work. We define our community engagement strategy through an acronym, REACH. So we respond, we energize, we activate. I'm going to forget the C. Cultivate, and honor the communities we work with and the areas in which we work. But this, the work of cultural equity and equity in general is not a static thing. And one of the values we hold as an organization is that we're a learning organization.
Right.
And we encourage feedback. And that, we get feedback from artists and we get feedback from community as well. I happen to have on my desk here a book. The first project we did was called Faces of Dudley. This was in 2015. And JR, the street photographer, had a big piece on the outside of the Hancock Tower. I don't know if you guys were around then, but it was like a big sensation. It just sort of appeared, and it looked like this guy like peering into a swimming pool or something. It was very mysterious.
Sounds cool. I haven't seen it.
It was really great. I can send you a link to it later.
Cool.
But what Now and There did was ask for their Inside Out truck, which was it still is around. It's like a mobile. It looks like a food truck, but it's a rolling photo booth.
Oh, cool.
So people would sort of sit in the back, have their portraits taken. It's a great lighting, so everyone looks beautiful. And then we printed out these 24 by 36 pieces of portraits. They all have a similar background, and then we wheat pasted them on the Roxbury branch of the Boston Public Library in what was then Dudley, now Nubian Square. And we were partnering with Cedric Douglas and the Inside Out truck. He had another sort of mobile truck to bring art and community activities around town. And there was this we had this idea that didn't execute like we had hoped. So the idea was, as people are waiting in line, and the line was getting really long because it was popular, we were asking folks, the prompt was something like, what wouldn't someone know about you just by seeing your picture on the wall?
Oh, wow.
And yeah, because, you can see my face, yours, someone else's, and, we all put judgments about it. And so they were supposed to write them on a little whiteboard and take a picture of it. The picture was of the whiteboard. But what happened is a bad game of telephone, and people were holding up the whiteboards in their photographs, which started to look like a mugshot, right? Oh. And the first one I saw go up, I'm like, that's nah. And then I told someone, and they were like, oh, it's fine. And months later, so the overall feedback was like, this is amazing. And we kept it up for a while as we paced. I didn't expect it to stay for so long. But I went one day, and there were these kids, and they're like, hey, there's Coach. Every time I went, people were like pointing at it, and they were very happy. But a couple months later, an elder of the community wanted to have a coffee with me. And she, very clearly told me, we liked the project, and they look like mugshots, and our community of Black and brown people, that's it's just too close, and not a good projection of it. That's not an image we want to be projecting, right? So you because getting back to, we're a learning organization. We're made up of 10 staff now. We're pretty big, but also really small. Yeah. And continuing to make sure that the works do honor and are additive to our city.
Right. I like that. I think it's really important to be receptive to the communities that you're representing. And I think it's easy, maybe not even through any one individual's fault, but just through the process of how long it takes sometimes for these things to get approved, that feedback gets lost in the chain sometimes with larger organizations. Yeah. So that's really great to have such quick turnaround time, and that you're accessible as the executive director of this organization to have a coffee with and to talk to that person about their perspective on it.
I'll have coffee with anyone.
That's so cool.
One thing that I just want to point out, and this is, I never thought I'd be in this sort of art form. I was trained as a painter, and you just sit alone in a room and listen to NPR and maybe smoke cigarettes or something. But it feels to me like practicing democracy. And I that I'm not coining this at all, but I've heard this said by other people in the public realm is, we have to work with the fire department. We have to listen to neighbors. Not have to. We do listen to neighbors. We do have to listen to, inspectional services. And you put these all together, and everyone makes like concessions, and it's a really fascinating way to understand how hard it might be to run a city or run government.
Yeah,
because you're like, we're just trying to put art in the world, not
right.
feed homeless or something.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, I noticed like some of the upcoming events with some of the artists, you guys have like some really amazing, cool people involved. And I think that's so cool. But I'm also curious to know what, as far as the grants go or the actual triennial events go, like what do you guys look for in, I guess in these proposals, or like from people locally in Boston that are maybe wanting to get involved with the triennial or the grants? Like, what do you guys look for in these people that you may not be familiar with their work, they're new to you guys, and they're approaching you for the first time?
Yeah. We talk a lot about empathy in the work. This is sort of I'm just going to give this sort of my personal, what I think makes what attributes make for a successful public artist.
Gotcha.
I think having a strong sense of why an artist wants to do the work, and I think that often comes from a personal place, and whether or not an artist wants to telegraph that, or actually speak it out is a whole other thing. But I think personally knowing I make this work because I want to honor my ancestors, or because, whatever personal, trauma, or because I want to, make Boston Public Art City, having that sort of conviction and sort of, if you could see me, I'm moving my hands up and down like this sort of center pole, that, pillar, is really important. A sense of empathy too, and understanding that, and there's some artists that just are going to make whatever they want, and they're going to not care at all how people see the work. Yeah, that just doesn't work in the public realm, because you have an audience that isn't asking to come to your work. You're sort of forcing your work upon them.
Right.
So understanding, what it might be like to be a neighbor seeing this work and having it in their yard, what it might be like for, mom pushing a stroller across to come across this and have to explain it to their kids. Then there's an understanding of place, and that's not just it does include the geographic, what the landscape might look like, but also the history, and a willingness to do a little digging around and know that, there are layers of presences and histories in a space. And specifically, and you might have seen this, we will have an open call starting June 16th, real soon, for the next round of the accelerator. So we'll be looking for 3 artists will be chosen by a jury, and those artists will be part of the triennial.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah. The website will be up next week by June 6th, and that has more of the criteria, sort of what we're looking for from artists applying.
And if we could circle back to that a little bit, the accelerator and the projects for the years that are not the triennial years. I wanted to talk more about that for the listener that might not be as familiar, like what that looks like and what you guys kind of offer and support, how you support these artists and curators, if it's curators too.
Yes, I wish it was curators. It's just artists right now, but that's one of our future plans. Let's get through the triennial first.
Yeah. One thing at a time.
Right. So the accelerator, the next. So this coming version is for larger projects and more advanced artists. The sort of traditional version of the accelerator, which will be will be back to in applications June of 2025 and June of 2026. Artists only have to apply with a portfolio We do not ask for a project idea. We ask for a portfolio, references, 2 references, bio, and then there's some questions that we ask artists to reflect on when it comes to their experiences with public art and why they think public art is, an art form worth investing in. So it's really based on portfolio and an applicant's. There's a applicant's. How do I say this? A readiness to bring their work to the large scale. There's some types of work that are just going to be harder than others to bring to public art. And I'm going to say like quilting, for instance, it's just like really, you can scan your work and then make it big, but it's going to be a little bit harder than someone who's used to working at maybe like a 2-foot scale,
Right.
small paper mache to bring it to like metal at 4 feet.
Yeah.
Is it like about kind of making sure that the person has the technical ability to literally to do that?
Some, but we give a lot of support. So I'll go through
cool.
the supports. So there's the first few months, we are looking at the sort of what we call the nuts and bolts of public art. And that's, how do you make a budget? Some folks need some support in, using Excel. What is insurance? Why do you need insurance? What's the difference between fine art insurance if your work is broken during the exhibition versus general liability? If you're driving with your work and have an accident. We invite in curators to look at the artist's portfolio and some of their emerging ideas. We have these, as I was saying earlier, conversations about what does your flavor of engagement look like? And for some people that might be, I want you to come and we're just going to co-create the project together. And then for other artists, it's saying, I know I'm going to make a cube and maybe you can help me pick out the color, or you're just going to help me paint it, and there's no judgment either way. It's just, knowing yourself. Over the course of these months, we also start looking at conceptual design. So artists are looking at both spaces that they might want to be involved in and general through core ideas. And they develop those projects over the course of the first 6 months with us, and then eventually present them to the original jury that brought them in. And it's that jury that will award the stipends. Following that, now the Boston Public Art Triennial will help those artists in putting their works out over the course of 8 months.
Interesting. We've also talked to, we recently talked, how should I say it? We talked to a public artist once who expressed, not necessarily frustration, but talking about how it was a pretty difficult and hard to understand process as a public artist working with the state or the city specifically, with different grants that come from, City Hall or whatever, I'm not a public artist either, so I guess I don't know all of the, whatever. But I'm curious to know, do you feel like the triennial is kind of is supplementing that pre-existing infrastructure of public art funding, or do you guys feel like it's going to be I'm struggling to word my question correctly, but I'm curious to know, do you feel like it's going to kind of be almost an alternative to the traditionally funded public art, or kind of just adding more color to it? And does that question make sense, Theo?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll sort of there's a couple questions and then I'll just start with the first one, which is just an affirmation of it is really hard. Public art is really hard because for the most part, cities in general are made up of, many different departments that don't necessarily talk to each other. And that's no shade on a city. It's just, running organizations is hard, right? I'm not right. Again, back to practicing democracy. And, someone has an idea, they have a little money, and the city maybe puts out a call, but they haven't talked to and I'm not using Boston as an example, but just any city, but they haven't talked to the transportation department, but they've, in their call for art, said that work is going to be on a property that's managed by transportation, and transportation's like, what?
Right.
So and then just as the maker, like I was saying earlier, it's hard work. It's physical labor. You're outside,
Right.
there's wind and elements, and like, did you know dog urine, will affect and corrode metal? And then, so yes, I'm just going to like validate it's really hard. And that's why we started the Public Art Accelerator, because you don't get a project unless you've had a project. So how do you get a project in the first place? Yeah. So we think of it as trying to open up this sort of pathway for future public artists wherever they may go. Mm-hmm. I think the triennial will be additive to the efforts of the city of Boston. Cambridge has a great program. Somerville has a great program, and sort of beyond. I think my hope is that it will show and demonstrate other new forms of public art, and that we will prove that it doesn't hurt anyone. Mm-hmm. That being a little adventurous in both, sort of scale and content, and who we choose as artists, is a good thing, and that it is helping pick up some maybe slack that one city department alone can't do. But I think overall it's additive. And someone once used this metaphor with me of I don't know if you play tennis or any sort of thing where like someone's hitting a ball at you, and if when you hit it back, if they're a really strong tennis player, it just sort of like your game gets better. And so there's that. I hope that with some really strong international artists that are coming in, that we can say, oh yeah, we can do that too, and really up our game.
Yeah. Something I really like too, just to kind of piggyback off of that a little bit, is what you said about the accelerator kind of providing support for things like if someone doesn't have experience with Excel, for example, or learning about mm-hmm. budgeting or insurance, because that is a really good example of the things that you learn in the field, but if you don't know how to do it, you might not get into the field. Like sort of industry knowledge, I guess. And that is a huge barrier for a lot of people to have opportunities like this. So having a program that's specifically acknowledging that and providing support is so wonderful. I think that's really accessible and great.
And let's encourage our schools, especially our art schools, to do more of this. And I know they are. But it's probably not mandatory, and it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I wish I had taken an Excel course.
I know. Or art business classes or art law.
Yeah.
The things you don't know you need when you're 18.
Exactly. Well, right. We have, in one of the programs, we have Jim Grace from Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts come in, and we do like a mock negotiation. And it's just like everyone's so uncomfortable because, I don't think it's for most people in general, negotiating is hard, but I think often for artists, it's even harder.
Yeah.
I'm curious to get your opinion on with bringing in these these bigger name international artists. Mm-hmm. Do you think that will, I guess, how do you? I know that it's really cool to do that because they're awesome artists and they're going to come in and make beautiful, really profound works. But I'm curious, do you think that those will, or I'm curious to know what kind of change do you think that would have on the local art community or the local public art sphere? To see, because that feels very different for Boston. I'm sure there's some, bigger name murals or installations that have happened in the past, but I feel like that is definitely a change in the landscape from how things currently are.
It is certainly from how the city of Boston now has a commissioning mandate where they didn't before, and this comes back to Mayor Walsh,
right.
And so kudos, thankfully that's happening. We've been doing this all along as Now and There, where 50% of our artists are local and 50% are not.
Oh, cool.
And what we found is that especially when they show side by side, we can elevate the recognition of the local artist. And there's an interesting reciprocity that can happen between the non-local and the local artist. and this idea of regional artists or local artists, I think, is getting more and more, how do I say this, is not going to be a thing, I think, in 10 or 15 years.
It's kind of becoming antiquated.
We're all moving around all the time. And,
right.
Just from think about hybrid remote working, but also if you look at it's easy to look at mural artists because there's only so many walls they can do,
mm-hmm.
right? So I look at Rixie, who came through the accelerator program. They've done a couple, pretty important walls, and now they're, in Miami, and there's somewhere, I can't, internationally, and that's important for them, for their name to keep getting out there. So it's also the inverse of, it's important for an international artist to come to Boston because they've saturated Copenhagen or wherever already.
Yeah.
We brought in Nick Cave to do an artwork in 2019, and it's the same summer that we commissioned Rob Pro Black Gibbs to do Breathe Life, the mural on Tremont Street.
Oh, is that the one that has the gold? It has a lot of gold coloring in it.
No, this is the one that there's a little girl sitting on top of her brother. You would know this, but it's her brother's shoulders. And they're both using ASL sign language to sign "Breathe Life."
I see.
It's right across from the piano factory in the People's Baptist Church.
Cool. Okay.
Excuse me. But I think. I watched the two of them interact, but I also heard from Rob that he was like, to be associated at the same level with Nick Cave and all of your marketing was important in my career. And now today, look at him. He's on the Greenway Wall, and, he's multiple school commissions. And yes, he did just do a project for the city of Boston. So I do think that there's an advantage to having international or national artists come in and, help elevate careers. I also look at it too from the point of view of, I can't afford to go travel all around and see all these artists and to know that they're here. We can go see the work by taking our public transit or the Blue Bike or whatever. I think it's a pretty great opportunity. And then lastly, what we're trying to figure out now is how do we make sure that local artists can meet these people? And again, there can be that, reciprocity, even if it's as simple as, a couple talks.
Yeah, I think if you had said we have them because it's awesome, I would have been like, that's cool. But I really love that perspective even more. So that's I think it's really cool that you guys are thinking about it. So I guess almost tactically, to kind of really figure out what's the best way we can make this awesome for all of the artists and staff involved.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd like to make everyone happy, but I know we won't.
Right, of course. And it's I think that's kind of a kind of, I think a lot of people get disillusioned with public art for that reason, where they feel like a lot of it's what's the point if it's all going to be this arduous, insanely difficult process just to make some sanitized thing that I didn't even want to make.
Right. And so that's the beauty of temporary. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
That's the beauty of temporary, is it's just a little bit easier. I mean, it's still almost as expensive because you're still building something outside, which is, construction level cost. But there's always that promise of it will go away. So there's just a little less worry and scrutiny. There's all the health, safety, and welfare scrutiny that needs to happen, but the I don't know if I can live with this forever. That level of agita has taken off.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting too, because I feel like maybe a majority of Boston's public art seems like it was made in the 1890s or 1910s or something, and they didn't, and they were just we're going to put this bronze guy here forever. It's never going away. I just learned
a new term, male and stale. I was like, I love that.
Yes.
Yes, there was a great proliferation of figurative statues. In the late 1800s, and there's been a lot of work to try and put in more statues of color and of women, but the stats on that are still really appalling.
Yeah.
And, and that's changing. The city's new programs, transformative public art programs, is trying to, make up for that.
Yeah, because it kind of makes you think that it makes you wonder, that process back then probably wasn't really that democratic at all, if that was the only type of thing that they were making, and it just is awarded this immortality of where, it's like as if it's a grave.
Yes. And there's a history of, especially the figurative statues being, they were paid for, some group of people or individuals with, will and some money put things, were able to put, statues in place. And some of them are positive, and, but yes.
Right.
Now it's a bit more democratic.
Yeah.
I like, that's a really, like, was that a kind of part? Oh, actually, never mind. We already addressed that. I'm curious to know too, kind of a change of gears. As far when the triennial on these like big, like, I forget the words you use specifically, but on the main events, the every 3-year main events, what will that actually look like? Will it be in like some kind of convention center, or will it be like an art walk kind of situation, or like what is that gonna like the big event gonna look like? I guess I haven't really been to one like this before. Yeah.
Well, we're making it up. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
there are a couple formulas for this, and there's 2 to look at. One is called Desert X in Coachella Valley, and I think they have maybe 10 projects during one of their they're a triennial as well, and they're in different locations in the Coachella Valley, and you drive around because they don't have public transportation.
And Coachella, is Coachella a town?
It's the valley outside of Palm Springs, California.
Okay, cool. I didn't know that. Sorry.
No.
Thank you.
Of course. And so there's 10 projects that you go to see, and they're, material, physical artworks. Another one is Counter Public, and that's in St. Louis, also a triennial. And again, you have to move around the city to see different projects. Sometimes they're inside and sometimes they're outside. So for this first Boston Public Art Triennial in 2025, we will have 15 projects.
Oh, wow.
And they'll be all outside. It's not true. Most of them will be outside. We're still working through the locations, but about 7 will be in the sort of downtown area between the waterfront and the museum area over by the Fenway. And then another 7 or 8 will be in the following neighborhoods: East Boston, Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan. As we're trying to locate these, we're trying as much as possible to create clusters so that if you are moving from maybe East Boston to Mattapan, or from Mattapan up to downtown, you'll find when you find one, there should be hopefully at least another within walking distance, so that people can people whose time is very precious can see multiple works at once. So it's and then there are a few interior spaces, but they are all 24/7 accessible. And a general, very public space. So what we want to make sure we're doing is that general audiences feel like they're welcome, and they don't have like a couple steps and gates to go through to experience the work.
Yeah.
One thing I want to note is how excited we are that also the major museums are participating. So we'll have the 15 artists that we're curating. Plus the accelerator projects, which will all be at Lot Lab in Charlestown. So that's 16. And then the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, the ICA Boston, the MFA Boston, and also they are creating new projects, new temporary works within the theme. And then MIT List Museum's public art installations will all be open and activated at the same time.
Oh, that's so cool. That sounds really fun.
Yeah, so it's like the summer of public art, you just anywhere you go, hopefully there's some art nearby.
Yeah. And so will it be up for the whole summer?
Yeah, so it'll actually be up for longer. So it's May 2025 through October 31st, 2025.
Oh, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very logistical question, I guess, but I'm just curious. The interior spaces, you said they'll be open like 24 hours?
I think so. We're trying to find lobbies, train stations, other places. Right. Some of the works are a little more delicate and might need some sort of roof sort of structure. So
that makes sense.
We're working through that. Yeah.
That's my next question was just going to be if those would be staffed for that whole amount of time, or if they'd be spaces like that. So that makes sense. They'd be sort of like in public transitional spaces, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool. That's awesome.
But that does remind me that we will have ambassadors, and that's another place that local artists, I hope, can get involved. Mm-hmm. So we'll have public art ambassadors. We're figuring out when they will be there, but certainly on the weekends. This is a paid position. Think of it like an outdoor art docent. So they're trained in both information about the artist and the works and what the visitor can see, but also trained in how to engage people and how to take feedback as they're standing there welcoming folks.
That's really cool. That sounds like a really good way to talk to a lot of people throughout the day about art.
Yeah. One of our assistant curator now was a public art ambassador, and it gave him such insight into how the general public really experiences art. He was like, wow. You'll hear all kinds of things. There was this amazing project by Eli Brown that was a big UFO on the waterfront in East Boston 2 summers ago, and I was walking by and someone was like, is it a nipple? And I was like, yeah, okay. I can see that now. I never saw that before.
Like there's a fresh perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's so funny.
Wow. So how do you think, I'm curious, actually, I just completely lost my train of thought.
Oh, it's gone.
You know what else I'm kind of, something else I've actually wanted to ask somebody working in this I guess in the public art world is how do you guys factor, or how do you guys find kind of the street art world and how that, I guess how that fits into public art? Because we recently talked to an artist that I feel like was in a pretty unique position where he had spent decades working as a street artist and doing murals wherever he wants, basically. So I'm and he's made this transition in his career to working with municipalities and with people who I guess I'm kind of curious, do you feel like there's a lot of people I guess there's a lot of people that are in that practice and have been doing that for so long and it's part of their life and their community. But I feel like maybe they see public art going up that doesn't look anything like that. It's I guess I'm curious, what, I don't know. I'm kind of, I guess it's hard to see a question of anything I just said.
No, I see all kinds of questions in there because I have some friends that have been in that world. And we did a project once with a female artist, Anne Lewis, who was in street art and then was sort of making these transitions, and I did not understand how hard it was, and also the whole language of street art. I think this also comes back to questions of access and equity. So if you're a really creative kid and you don't have a strong arts program, or you don't feel welcome in an arts program, and right in front of you it's easy to get some markers, or it's easier to get a couple of cans of aerosol. It's a really fast way to make expression and mark. And then there's a whole culture that's built around that, and pride and identity. So I think there are folks that will sort of enter into creative expression that way, and it's a path, right? So in the same way that if you're a trained artist and you're kind of told you need to figure drawing or painting, which one do you want to do first, or sculpture? I was forced into that. Are you going to be a sculptor? Or are you going to be a painter? And I was like, what? This was art. We do it all. So it's easy for artists to kind of get into, especially if they're trying to make a living off of it, to do something that they do well, and then they get kind of trapped into continuing to do that because someone comes along, they're like, hey, I saw the mural with the ladybug on it. Can you do that again? And they're like, oh, okay, I guess I'll do that again because I'm, getting paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to watch people try and make those transitions, and I think it's possible, because then there's also something called mural arts, which is not street art. That's a whole other way of making sort of larger pictures with paint, but it's not using graffiti, it's not using graph writing, it's not using,
Mm-hmm.
We can have a whole other conversation about this, and I invite in some real street artists to talk about it. But it always does feel like a separate thing from sculpture. But at the end of the day, they're all trying to make, more visibility and vibrancy in the neighborhood. So I don't know why we have to differentiate them.
And one other thing too that I just realized I'm not clear on are the artworks that are going to be part of the triennial, are they all sculpture, or are there some murals involved in that too?
We don't have any murals. They're all three-dimensional works. Some are more interactive than others. Some have more participation early on than others, but they are going to be sort of objects that take up space.
Oh, cool! Very exciting.
Yeah, that's actually
I think there's
incredible.
A lot of really strong. There's a lot of strong murals that are and programs that are happening right now that I don't feel like we need that as much as as sort of objects and sculptures.
Well, that's what I was just thinking is we do have, like, I think as of the last few years, even the mural community in Boston, I feel like has been getting bolstered in a way that it hasn't in the past, which is really great to see. Yeah. But we don't see new sculptures very often. So that's really exciting, actually.
They're hard to do. I mean, it's all hard, but yeah. So we're excited to bring some more.
And during the accelerator process, I know I'm asking very technical questions, but I'm just curious about this. When you're working with an artist that maybe hasn't done like public art on that scale before, but has work that can be expanded that way, and they start kind of the process of the accelerator, do you work with like people in construction or like engineers to figure out how to make that sustainable, or is that kind of research that the artist is doing?
We try as much as possible to point artists into to partner or pair them with experts in those particular areas. The one example that comes to mind is Tanya Nixon-Silberg. Tanya is a storyteller, puppeteer, educator, incredible artist from Boston. And Tanya wanted to have people experience something like a lambe. I think it's called lambe box, which is this small box you peer into and you turn a dial and the sort of puppets move within it. And she liked that experience of kind of peering in and that reward. And then sort of conceptually, she wanted to really showcase Black joy and with small with girls. And so she was really struggling about like, how do I make this? And we were like, we were also like, we've never done anything like this before. And then she came in with an idea about planting and growth, and from there she was interested in indigo dyeing, and like you can just see how this like sort of unfolded in like a really beautiful way, and we were like all trying to like keep up with her brilliant mind. And we wound up partnering, finding her a fabricator. Actually, we found her a general sort of contractor who then found her a fabricator. And this guy built a beautiful wooden container. It's probably like 5 feet tall. And on either side, there are two profiles that come out from the cylinder. two female profiles at the top. He made a planter, and she planted indigo that she then later harvested and dyed. And inside the planter, at the bottom, at like kids level, was a little box, and it's still there. And you can see little puppet figures in there. And then there's a whole history within the puppetry tied to Boston history, and it kind of goes on and on from there. But it this gets back to when you were like, what are you looking for in an artist? It's someone like Tanya who has a really strong idea that she wants to honor Black joy within girls and create something that's nurturing. And,
that's
everyone
really
figured
cool.
out a way to help make that happen.
Yeah, that sounds so rewarding as the artist in that position, because it sounds like the idea can kind of blossom into something like you couldn't have planned from the beginning.
Yeah, I think yes, and I think also it's a hard process.
Right.
And I've watched a lot of artists, work through it, and I think maybe a year after they're like, oh yeah, that was a nice blossoming, but it's challenging,
Yeah.
It's still like, I don't know how to make this. I don't know what I'm doing, and
Yeah.
But that's where the self-awareness and empathy comes in.
Mm. That's so cool. I'm so excited to see what this looks like. I didn't know what a triennial was until I saw the post about this happening on the Now and There page. So I'm so glad that we were able to talk about it and learn about it.
Yeah, me too. And if you have fun ideas about how we tell people what a triennial is, let us know. We kind of have this running joke that we should start an Instagram sort of a hashtag, like, is this a triennial? Where like someone picks up a water glass and they're like, is this a triennial? There's this like general, like, we have to like help people understand what this is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering if it was triennale.
Yes, well, you can also say that too if you're in Europe.
Gotcha.
So if you want to, should we do that, or can we give it a Boston accent, like triennale? Boston accent.
Yeah, I was really excited to do this interview, and to tell you the truth, I did not have any idea what I knew we would get great insights, but I didn't know what to expect, and I'm so happy that this has been. I don't know. I just think I just get really, as we're all artists on this call, and we all know that it can be so difficult and really frustrating to kind of run the ringer of grants and this and shows. So it's really cool to talk to you, the person, I know you're part of a team, but the person running it, and to see how inspired and excited and your vision. I mean, I know you guys are going to do great things. So
thank you.
It sounds awesome.
Thank you. And it's been really amazing to talk with you guys on a Friday after like a really hard week and talk about grants and grant reports. And I'm like, I'm just looking at budgets all day. And this has been, good reminder of why we're doing this and the power of, holding on to a process and having faith in artists and what can come out. So thank you. It's been really, really lovely. And hope we can keep talking, and hope you guys will come be part of the Triennale or the Triennale or whatever you want to call it.
100%.
Yeah, we would love to.
Yeah, you're awesome. Thank you for blessing our show and for adding your perspective to
thank you.
This is episode 151. So thanks
good number.
for coming on. Anyway, all right. I hope you have a great weekend.
Congratulations to you guys too on the show. It's really important that we have this dialogue and share these experiences. So
thank you so much. Yeah,
thank you.
We love doing it. So
all right. Hope you have a great weekend. Safe travels.
Thanks, you too.
Talk soon.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Boston Art Podcast is an independent DIY production by Brian Huntress and Theodora Earthworms. The information contained in this episode represents the views and opinions of the original creators or our guests, and does not represent any institution, organization, or business. Find us on Instagram at Boston Art Podcast, and tune in for a new episode every Friday. Thank you for listening.